Hello, and welcome back to Soulmates Commander Abridged. I'm Tom, and I'll be your narrator for the evening. In this game, a Viking, a ninja, a cat and a dog, and a literal god are all facing off for the win. Let's get into the turn order and the deck breakdown. Going first is James's Rin Seri Inseparable deck, a mostly cat tribal deck with some dogs and changelings too. It's looking to create as many dog and cat tokens as possible to swing in for a kill with some pump spells and enchantments, while also utilizing Rin Seri's activated ability to deal damage and gain some life. Second is CJ's Karametra God of the Harvest deck. This deck's goal is to spit essentially all of the lands from the deck out onto the battlefield as quickly as possible by looping cheap creatures, then dropping some hefty lands matter finishers. Going third is Cap's Fynn the Fangbearer deck, a mono-green infect deck with one infect creature, looking to get poison counters on players early with small death touch creatures thanks to Fynn, then making things unblockable and proliferating in the late game to secure the win. Finally, there's my Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow deck. We're looking at all of the ninjas, all of the top deck manip, and all of the free to cast blue and black spells to flip off the top for direct damage around the table. James starts off the game with a forest, then passes to CJ, who also plays a forest, and passes to Caps, who also plays a forest. But this guy has a turn 1 play. He drops in a Fynn Horn Elves, then passes to me, and I am legally obliged to not continue the forest train. I instead play a Glasspool Shore tapped as my land for the turn, then I pass. James plays a Battlefield Forge, casting a Farseek, finding a Temple Garden, which enters the battlefield tapped and passes to CJ. CJ draws, then plays a Plains as his land for the turn, and he passes the turn to Caps. Caps plays a Detection Tower, then casts his commander, Fynn the Fangbearer, and a Carpet of Flowers. After that, he passes the turn. I drop in a Swamp, then cast a Baleful Strix, which draws me a card when it enters the battlefield, and with nothing else for now, I pass. James plays a Dryad Arbor as his land for the turn, and casts a Talisman of Impulse, and then ships the turn to CJ. CJ plays a Field of Ruin, then taps 3 for Anissa's Pilgrimage, allowing him to grab 2 forests, one of which enters the battlefield tapped, and the other going into his hand. After that, he passes to Caps. Caps plays a Skullwinder, kindly targeting me, as I am the only other one with an empty yard, so this is merely a maneuver to build out his stanky little Death Toucher front line. He enters combat and swings Fynn at James, dealing him 1 commander damage and putting 2 poison counters on him. After combat, he moves directly through the second main and passes to me. I play a Mutavault as my land for the turn, then cast a Sword of the Animist, followed by a Sensei's Divining Top. Keeping up a blocker, I pass the turn. On James's turn, he taps for 4, taking a damage each from the Talisman of Impulse and the Battlefield Forge in order to cast his commander, Rin Seri Inseparable. He then passes the turn. CJ plays a forest, then casts his commander, Karametra God of the Harvest. After that, he too passes the turn. Caps taps out for Toski Bearer of Secrets, then enters combat. He swings Fynn at CJ and the Skullwinder at James, dealing them 1 damage each and giving them each 2 more poison counters, bringing James up to a total of 4. Toski then triggers, allowing Caps to draw 2 cards. Going through his second main again, he passes to me. I play a Swamp for the turn, then equip the Sword of the Animist to the Baleful Strix. I head to combat and swing the Strix at Caps to trigger the sword. I find an island from my library and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then, as Caps has no suitable blockers for the ordeal, before damage, I Commander Ninjutsu out Yuriko, putting her onto the field attacking Caps instead of the Strix, which returns to my hand. Caps takes 1 damage, which triggers Yuriko. I reveal an absolute unit of an Ornithopter off the top of my library, dealing 0 damage to my opponents. In my second main, I play the Ornithopter, and then pass the turn. James starts off by casting Realm Walker, triggering Rin Seri, getting him both a cat and a dog due to Realm Walker's Changeling ability. He names cats as the creature type for Realm Walker's other ability, then takes a quick peek at the top of his library, goes to combat, swings Rin Seri at CJ, dealing him 4 commander damage, then passes the turn. CJ plays a forest, then taps 3 for a Fertile Footsteps, sending his friendly neighborhood Beanstalk Giant out on an adventure. CJ grabs a Plains from his library, which enters the battlefield untapped, then casts White Mane Lion twice, bouncing it back to his hand and triggering Karametra both times, going back into the deck for 2 more lands that enter tapped. He grabs 2 basic forests, then passes the turn. At the start of Cap's main phase, Carpet of Flowers triggers now that I have an island tapped on the field, adding a green to his mana pool. He taps 2 more lands to cast a Growing Rites of Itlamok. I totally get him here though by casting a foil, discarding an island and a Mystic Sanctuary in order to cast it for no mana. Caps then enters combat, swinging all but the Fynn Horn Elves at me. I don't block a damn thing, take 3 damage, get 4 poison counters from Fynn's ability. Caps then draws 3 cards from Toski's ability, and in his second main, he casts a Sedge Scorpion and passes to me. I start off by casting a Ponder, check it out, do some stuff, draw a card, then I enter combat. I swing the Ornithopter at Caps, who again has no blocks, so I regular ninjutsu in a Mist Syndicate Naga right before damage. The Naga creates a copy of itself when it connects, and also triggers Yuriko, for which I reveal a Decree of Pain from the top of my library, sending 8 damage each upstairs to the rest of the table. In my second main, I recast the Ornithopter, and then pass to James. James draws, then looks at the top of his library, courtesy of Realm Walker. He casts a Prowling Serpapard, triggering Rin Seri to create another dog token. Also, look at this sick altar. These are James's pets. They are cute. James enters combat and swings Rin Seri at me, and I graciously accept 4 damage. With that, James passes the turn. CJ plays a Plains, and then passes the turn with this statement.
I'm going to pass, and I'll leave an ominous warning. Don't attack me.
We're all flashing White Mane Lion 6 times.
Actually, that one. Yeah.
All right, that's fair.
Caps again gets 1 green mana in his pool during his main phase from Carpet of Flowers and plays a forest as his land for the turn. He uses his mana from the carpet and 3 other lands to cast a Shinen of Life's Roar for its channel ability, targeting Toski with it. He then enters combat and swings his 3 Death Touchers and Toski at me. James tries to Superman save my ass by casting a Swords of Plowshares targeting Fynn, but Caps responds to that with a heroic intervention. I unfortunately take all of the damage, go straight up to 10 poison counters, lose the game. Quite frankly, silly move, Carpet of Flowers is now totally dead, awful decision. I'm not mad. Caps then draws 3 cards from Toski's ability. He goes to his end step, discarding to hand size, and passes to now James. James plays a brush land as his land for the turn, and then casts a Maskwood Nexus, making all his creatures in all zones become every creature type. Cats becoming dogs, dogs becoming wolves. He enters combat and swings both Rin Seri and the Prowling Serpapard at Caps, who does not block and takes 8 damage. With nothing else, James passes to CJ. But, oh wait. At James's end step, CJ flashes out and returns to hand his White Mane Lion not twice but thrice, allowing him to get 3 basic lands from his library with Karametra. He grabs 2 plains and a forest, all entering tapped. After this, he activates his Field of Ruin to blow up Caps' Desolate Lighthouse, allowing the table to look for a basic land each and put it onto the battlefield. Caps grabs a basic forest, James grabs the delightful Jumpstart Puppy Plains, and then CJ grabs a significantly less adorable Plains, which allows him to flash in the White Mane Lion once more for yet another basic land. He then starts his actual turn. He casts a Masked Admirers, which triggers Karametra. He grabs a Mistveil Plains and puts it to the battlefield tapped. Masked Admirers then draws him a card, and he plays a Rogue Passage as his land for the turn, and passes. Cap starts off by playing a forest. He then casts a Lightning Greaves, equips it to Fynn, then follows that up by casting a Deadly Recluse. He enters combat and swings out at CJ, who responds by casting Rout at instant speed by paying just a little bit more. Everything dies except for Toski and Karametra. CJ still takes 1 damage from Toski, allowing Caps to draw a card. In his second main, Caps equips the Greaves onto Toski, and then passes the turn. James untaps and draws, then casts Rin Seri. After that, he passes. However, and be sure to let us know in the comments if you saw this shit coming, CJ does the whole White Mane Lion thing again, grabs 2 more lands from his library, this time a basic forest, and a Temple Garden. He goes and starts his turn. Then he casts a Search for Tomorrow, grabbing yet another basic forest to put onto the battlefield. He brings in our old friend the Beanstalk Giant from his adventure, triggering Karametra once more to grab another land. He counts up his lands and announces that the Beanstalk Giant is merely 21/21. No evasion, not a big deal. Passes the turn. Caps plays a forest as his land for the turn, then recasts Fynn the Fangbearer from his command zone. He moves the Lightning Greaves over to Fynn, then enters combat and sends his mandatory Toski attack at James. James blocks it, takes no damage. Caps then passes the turn to James. James plays a Temple of Triumph, scries from the trigger, and sends the top card of his library straight to the bottom. He casts a Jedit Ojanen of Afrava, taking 1 damage from tapping his brush land for a green mana, and triggering Rin Seri for both a dog and a cat token, since Jedit is technically all creature types now. After that, he passes the turn. Yet again, CJ paddleballs his White Mane Lion at James's end step for 5 more lands, goes to his turn, and starts off by playing a Soul of Theros. Then, oh, that's right, he's got a Rogue's Passage, which he activates to make his now 26/26 Beanstalk Giant unblockable. He also remembers that Karametra was actually triggered by the Soul of Theros, so he grabs another land, and guess what? Actually a 27/27. Then he pumps it even more, using Soul of Theros for an additional +2/+2, also First Strike, and also Lifelink. He goes to combat, swings the Beanstalk Giant at Caps, killing him instantly and gaining himself 29 life. In his second main phase, he plays an Eternal Witness, getting yet another basic land from Karametra, grabbing the route from his graveyard. Seeing no way out of this, James scoops him up, which CJ reveals immediately to be extremely justified, as he had a flawless maneuver in his hand, which would have made the route one-sided anyway. To wrap it all up, Caps definitely made himself an early archenemy, throwing poison counters around and absolutely nuking me out of the game very early. Ultimately though, White Mainline and Karametra does some serious work and won CJ the game. The amount of lands he got with just one card bouncing itself over and over again was truly a sight to behold. The table couldn't keep up, and from there, an unblockable Beanstalk Giant is really all you need to close the game out.